I'm Nick Muggeridge. If the Chilcott inquiry can only report the gist of conversations between Tony Blair and George Bush, was it worth the effort and expense?
The expense so far is $7 million. The contribution that is either going to be there by gist or by other means is 25 notes and 130 records of conversations. And Chilcott has said that the use of this material should not reflect President Bush's views. How do you see this? Benedicte Pavio.
Worryingly. I think that particularly I have to also put it in the context of the EU elections. We know, and I'm not going to go that, but that there was some protest there. But I think we are very much in a phase in this 24/7 world of globalized news, of Twitter, social media, instant access to so much. Everybody, or a lot of people, have opinions. A small minority sometimes very vociferously make their points also on social media. It's very worrying to look at this exercise, one that I went to indeed at the launch, and I asked Lord Chilcott. He had said in his introduction that he would, without fear or favour, criticise people. And I said, will you do that? And since we're just before the general election, but you've got a few months ahead of you, can you give us a stab at that so that when people go to vote in 2010, they can have an opportunity to express some of their discontent or not about the UK's participation or the justification that was given to the population and indeed to the MPs to go into that war. And he said that no, it would be too short a time. Here we are, 5 years later, and it just looks like such a fudge. And I think it was John Major this morning on the Today programme who was saying that it was regrettable, and it was indeed in Tony Blair's gift to overrule that and to say, I am prepared to not just have gists, not just have quotes. And I think that that would be an important thing and an important signal to do, or this will continue to haunt this country. If there is one possibly beneficial effect that expedition, and look at Iraq today, it is hardly a success story. People are killed on a daily basis. There is not peace there. And there are many questions about how Britain went into that war. Interesting that France came to very different conclusions, need I make the point more, both at the UN and in general, with exactly the same intelligence information. So I think for the democracy in the future, belief, and we are witnessing a lack of trust in politicians, a lack of trust in MPs, a lack of trust in our bankers, and it would behoove Mr. Blair to release and give permission for as much as possible to be published, or this will continue to be a wound that will fester.
I think he has said that he is... I think I'm right in saying he said that he is willing for it to be published, and the problem therefore lies with the government number 10's machine in relation to the Americans, because the Americans are conceivably not at all happy. I don't know, but
that's a separate point. The fact that the American president doesn't want his letters published, we understand.
Yeah.
But we do want on the British side, or it just looks like, you know, when we were told this morning that intelligent and expert people on the panel have looked at it. I'm sorry. What this country wants is to have this accountability. That is what is needed, that is required, and that's what needs to happen.
Trevor Kavanagh.
It isn't the government or Downing Street itself that makes the decision. It's the Cabinet Office and Jeremy Hayward. And I think that the decision not to publish George Bush's letters and messages is the right one, because I think it would destroy any future relationship between British intelligence and American intelligence, and that's a very important asset. I do think that Tony Blair should overrule, as far as he possibly can, the decision by Chilcott and make these messages available. I don't think he will, and I don't think he will because I think that he has not necessarily something to hide, but certainly enough information will be then available to justify the critics of the war and the reasons for going to war. And I speak as a representative of a newspaper that supported the Iraq war on the basis of the information that we were being told, along with the rest of the world, about why we were going to war. And I think we were, at least to some extent, misled, if not only on the causes of the war and the weapons of mass destruction, but also on the promises that were given at the time to clear up afterwards and to repair the damage and put the Iraqi nation back on its feet and make it into a viable nation. And quite clearly and demonstrably we're seeing precisely the opposite in a country which is probably worse off today than it was under Saddam Hussein.
Do you think, Trevor, that the Lord Chilcott can draw what conclusions he wants, because he has seen all the evidence, that he can draw conclusions which will be seen to be credible nonetheless because of his approach to the whole thing, or not?
No, I think it is possible. And Chilcott has promised both privately and publicly that this will not be a whitewash. Well, the acid test will be in the report. I hope that he lives up to that expectation and that we learn all we need to know about why we went to war.
Claire Fox.
I've long felt uneasy about the Chilcott inquiry because I don't really understand the purposes of it any more. It seems to me that many of us know that we were lied to in relation to what happened to the war in Iraq. It's one of the wars that has been gone over and over in terms of more and more information. I also don't know that I need to know what's in these letters, or any of us need to know in these letters, in relation to what we think about whether we should have intervened or not intervened. So in terms of whether the inquiry's wasting our time or not, I was opposed to the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War. I think not just myself, but you can work out on principle how you feel about military intervention without reading everybody's private correspondence to work it out. And the dodgy dossier, which has been well revealed, surely is sufficient for us to understand that certainly the public were told mistruths. So sometimes it feels to me as though all this is kind of having the truth and more truth and more truth to prove that we know that Tony Blair was a liar, that Campbell was deceitful. It kind of confirms our own prejudice. And when it's sort of said, well, if we only read what's in these letters, it will get rid of the festering wound, I don't believe that anymore.
So does that mean whether he did or did not make a private, secret commitment to President Bush is neither here nor there, because the decision that was given is one that you regard as totally inadequate?
I'm saying that every aspect of decision making does not need to be made public in terms of making decisions about going to war. And actually, even though I disagreed with that war, I think that we have to protect, to a certain extent, private decision making by politicians. There has to be some space for them to be able to have a private conversation without it all being revealed.
Billy Bragg.
Thank you. Blair made a bigger issue of having a debate about war. It was the first time that we'd had a debate in Britain. The Prime Minister has a royal prerogative that allows he or her to declare war without a debate before Parliament. And that debate was very, very important. If it now transpires that Tony Blair had already said we're going to go to war, George, don't worry about it, then I'm afraid people really want to know that, because so much of the mistrust, and some people forget this, the mistrust that people feel about politics doesn't actually date from the duck houses and the expenses scandal. It dates from the lies that all of us believe, as Claire touched on, that we were told about the reasons why we went into the Iraq war. And we owe it, frankly, to the families of our servicemen and women who were killed in Iraq, who were injured in Iraq, some of them still dealing with the effects of what they saw out in Iraq. We owe it to them to find out the truth behind this. And otherwise, if that's not what's going to happen, if we're going to be denied that, then we have to rely on people like Edward Snowden to ultimately tell us the truth about what happens.
Was it worth the effort and expense? Nick Muggeridge, you put the question.
I accept that leaders, world leaders, should be able to talk in private and for that not to be reported. But this was a decision about a war, and I think it is in the British public's interest to know whether Tony Blair did give Bush an assurance that we would be part of that war in the earlier date, long before he consulted Parliament, or whether he didn't. And if that isn't reported, we will make our own assumptions.
Who thinks that Chilcott can still be, as Trevor Kavanagh says, can still be credible in drawing the conclusions, even if, for various reasons, not all the information that Chilcott has is made public? Who thinks it can still be credible, something that you can come from it and say, yes, I now understand it clearly, or much more clearly? Would you put your hands up? Those who think in general they're prepared to give, as it were, Lord Chilcott the benefit of the doubt. Would you put your hands up? Those who are not so prepared to do, well, here the overwhelming majority is not prepared to accept the credibility of Chilcott in the absence of all the documents being made publicly available.
I did say that I thought that they should be made public.
Yes, no, I know.
I think the strength of the conclusions that Chilcott draws and the power with which he expresses those conclusions, I think will do whatever, deliver the effect that I think you're looking for if he wants to.
I think also what we'll discover is that the planning was absolutely, of post-war, was appalling.
Thank you. I must leave it there, and I can squeeze in one more question.
My name's Elizabeth Ross Talbot. My question is, where are all the protest songs?
And I'm going to break all precedent because of the time that we have, and I'm just going to ask one person to answer it. No guesses. Billy Bragg.
Well, this is... I'm afraid music no longer has its vanguard role in youth society. When I was 19 and I was angry about the world, there was only one medium available for me to make my voice heard. I was never invited onto any questions back then. I don't know why, but the only way
you were just too busy making singing.
The only way I was making singing. The only way I was. Did you ever do English literature?
No, I was.
What basically music was our social medium. It's the way we spoke to one another. It's the way we spoke to our parents' generation. Now, if you're angry, there's a number of things you can do. You can make a film, put it on YouTube, write a blog, start a Facebook page, call up a crowd on Twitter. I think that's a positive thing because it allows so many more people to engage in the debate. The negative side is nobody is ever going to invite you to tour America reading out your Facebook posts.
And that, I'm afraid, brings us to the end of this week's programme. And I must just do one moment more of doing talking. You may think that the campaign's been going on for ever and a day, but actually the formal campaign in Scotland only starts this very day. We're going to be in Dundee next week. Join us there. For now, from the Steyning Grammar School in West Sussex, goodbye.